There's a looming crisis on the horizon. That's where they always start. Hello, this is Gamer1745 here with a commentary and analysis of current world affairs analyzed through the historical lens. And I thought I would bring it to you, especially once I saw this very recent picture. But before we get into that, real quick, if you're new here, please hit the subscribe button, and everyone can hit that like button. I really would appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. All right, civis pacem parabellum. If you want peace, prepare for war. And that's very much at the heart of everything I'm going to be talking about here today. A looming crisis, move this aside for the moment, is China and Taiwan. Here. That's the looming crisis. Now, the People's Republic of China has always considered the island of Taiwan, or Formosa, however you want to call it, to be an integral part of their country, and they still consider it so. So long as it was governed as the Republic of China, a breakaway province, they were relatively content with the idea that someday in the future there will be an opportunity, we will retake it. Maybe with the world socialist revolution happening or whatever. Now, that Taiwan is a country, and it is more becoming the idea of Taiwan and not the Republic of China, that has become a severe problem for China. There's multiple reasons China wants Taiwan. May get into some of that later on. But this is the flashpoint. I see it. One of two, but this is the one we're talking about today. Ask me sometime maybe about the other major one, but that could cause functionally another world war, and quite possibly a nuclear world war. So it could be really bad. Now, let's take a quick look at this photo here. The aircraft carriers USS Ronald Reagan, USS Carl Vinson, HMS Queen Elizabeth, the Japanese helicopter destroyer Ise are leading vessels from 6 nations through the Philippine Sea. Not sure which one's the Reagan and which one's the Carl Vinson here, but that's the Queen Elizabeth, and that would be the Japanese helicopter destroyer, as it's called. I don't know if the Japanese have any vertical takeoff airplanes, but helicopters are really only useful in a major naval sense in anti-submarine warfare. And leading 6 nations, so there would be 3 other nations' ships here, besides leading vessels from 6 nations. Yeah, so 3 other nations coming through here. Now, the military power, is my assessment, is either one of the U.S. carriers is more powerful than all the rest of the non-U.S. carriers combined. Even more than the Queen Elizabeth, but that's British are coming in close. Right, and this is a very, very recent photo. Then these ships still, as I'm speaking and as I'm making this, still may be probably not for sailing in this formation. This is for a photo op formation, not an operation. I can't properly take on and off at least fixed-wing aircrafts this close to each other effectively. They very well may be still sailing a company right now as I make this. That's how recent this is. And here is the Philippine Sea. Okay. This is why it is important. Like I said, if you want peace, prepare for war. And here's the most simple analysis of it, and then I'll get into details. If China believes it can successfully invade Taiwan, and there's going to be little or no direct opposition to the invasion of it, I believe they will do so. I just believe they will do so. Now, if China believes that either it can't effectively, and you can look into how difficult it is to, and the Taiwanese have made it even more difficult by obstacles. It is a very difficult island to invade. Notice the Americans and the island hopping campaign bypassed it. Like I say, it's a very difficult island to invade, so they may not feel that they can successfully invade it at this time in a manner in which they want to do it. And two, they may or may not believe that what the world reaction will be overly dramatic. And so those are two conditions that are there. One or two, they're both Chinese perceptions. Does China perceive that it'll be a successful invasion? Yes or no, binary question. Second, does China perceive that the world reaction will not be general warfare of one type or another? We can get into it, but just, condemnations, sort of like what's happening over Hong Kong, as we see here, or, trade sanctions or breaking diplomatic ties. If it just thinks it's going to be those kinds of things, I think it'll do it. But if it thinks that there's going to be U.S. carriers launching aircraft, shooting down or attacking the landing ships that would be coming across, if they believe there's going to be as we modern day say, kinetic response to the invasion, and a significant one, not just one of these ships happens to be in the area and things are flying around, so they shoot off a few anti-aircraft missiles, but a significant response. I don't believe the Chinese will invade. So this is all dealing with Chinese perception of what's going on, not what the rest of the world perceives, and not maybe reality. We can look at, this is sort of part of the historical analysis element, where we see Hitler was very afraid of the Soviet reaction to the invasion of Poland. He believed, after his invasions of Austria, non-violent military invasions of Czechoslovakia, not the Sudetenland, but the rest of Czechoslovakia, again a non-violent military invasion in which the world, just condemned or whatever, didn't react to it. He believed the likelihood was a non-general declaring war by France and Britain. He believed that. Obviously, he was wrong, but he knew it was a gamble, but he believed that their reaction was going to not be to go to war. He was more worried about Stalin, so he had the Ribbentrop-Molotov pact negotiated. So that's the situation. World War II broke out on Hitler's belief that not that there wouldn't have been war eventually, but that Hitler's belief that Britain and France would not go to war over Poland or the Danzig corridor or whatever. So we're looking at what China believes is the reaction to what's going on. And in many ways, China has basically said that they will one day control Taiwan, and very likely through a military invasion, and are preparing their people for warfare. I can maybe link the channel below. Serpent ZA, I guess you could call him, a South African who lived for years in China, has a very good channel and has analyzed some of China's propaganda and other stuff as what it's telling its people is going to be happening. Right. Okay. Now, remember, 6 nations. We know Japan's here. We know Britain and the US. Probably Australia. Probably the Philippines. Maybe South Korea. I don't know who the other 3 are, but those are probables. Now, here's the China's behavior in Hong Kong, and I'll get to it eventually here, along the India-Chinese border, along the India-Bhutan border. Years ago, there was actually, not like a declared war, but heavy fighting between Vietnam and the People's Republic of China, in which Vietnam actually did very well and probably would be considered of won the border skirmishes. I mean, they were war in that there were thousands of troops involved on both sides, and artillery and aircraft and that, but not major invasions either side. But so I don't know if you want to call that a war or a skirmish, but significant things. China has not done well, and really the People's Republic of China has not really done well in anything outside of its civil war, and I'm even including the Korean War, in which they were fought to a stalemate. And yeah, they retook North Korea when the UN forces were hugely overextended and way badly out of position, because they thought the Chinese weren't going to intervene, and they were just mopping up action. So they were way unprepared for a Chinese reaction. And once they got more or less basically that border, they weren't able to push any further south, and the UN forces weren't prepared for the military commitment, including loss of lives, of trying to push China out of North Korea. So even there, they sort of kind of held their own, but that was it. China has not done militarily. The People's Republic of China has not done militarily very well outside of China. And no, I don't consider invading some place like Tibet being much of a difficulty. So China's military prowess is not very good, but that doesn't mean that it can't lead to a serious war. All right, why do we care about Taiwan? Well, we get our graphics cards and other computer chips from Taiwan, but yeah, I mean, obviously, actually, there's some fabrication being set up in the United States, probably going to be other ones set up, fabrication set up in other places, because of some of Trump's tariffs against China. They were starting to set up more and more. The companies that had been in China were setting up more and more places like Vietnam, Bangladesh, India, for other manufacturing. So it's a manufacturing giant, but that is not, and defending a non-communist island from Chinese aggression is not why the rest of the world is so concerned about what's going on. It is geopolitical, shall we say. It is strategic points. Taiwan is an important island here. Probably everyone here knows they have what they call the 9-dash line on some of their maps that since it's called the South China Sea, it must belong to China, including way down in the Spratly Islands. They have either found a few either permanent islands or a few tidal islands, meaning tide is low, the island it was exposed, tide high, non-exposed, but they built them up to purely artificial islands, put naval bases on them. That is an element of an economic zone, and we can talk about that, but it's more important than just an economic zone. It is controlling trade, and this is a major trade route. So, and also China has been claiming and trying to occupy some of these islands that Japan considers its territory. This is Okinawa in here. Some of these islands out here. Those are in Japanese. I'm not sure. I think that's Japanese. Yeah, that's Japanese, I would say. So some of these islands China has been claiming. Now, if Taiwan or any of these islands are occupied by China, China already has bases occupying down here. They can shut down a lot of trade. And being able to threaten shutting down even more trade. There is a huge amount of traffic that comes through Singapore, comes through the straits here. That is, my understanding is the primary shipping traffic to Europe and the Indian Ocean. Yes, you can come through some of these others, but so things like oil to Japan to Korea comes this way through the South China Sea. Trade shipping to Europe comes through South China Sea. Vietnam, Thailand, there's almost no ports over here for Thailand. Cambodia will all be trading through the South China Sea. And yeah, if they get claim on these islands, why do we expect them not to get claim on other islands? Oh, there's Chinese people living here, it must belong to China too. Because we're seeing this aggression everywhere, this is what is concerning these nations. Now, we can see, again, that was 6 nations. These Chinese actions have a reaction to them, which is AUKUS. Australia, United Kingdom, and US alliance setting up. There is the SWATO, which is a Southeast Asia Treaty, something or other. Sorry, it's a fairly old alliance, but it's not nearly as, in my opinion, it is not nearly as active as NATO, as in training and command and control, and it is not nearly as stable as a NATO alliance. Meaning, the politics of, this is Boris Johnson, Joe Biden, and I don't know who the Australian Prime Minister is. Sorry, right offhand. I heard his name. Morrison. I believe it's Morrison. Or Morris, something like that. Sorry. These political leaders change, their policies change over time. And again, we're dealing with Chinese perception of what's going on and not necessarily reality. But how strong would these governments be to the Southeast Asia Treaty Alliance, or whatever it's called? If one of its members, I don't know, Singapore or something, I'm not sure exactly who's a member of that alliance technically currently, gets invaded by another person, another nation, what are these countries' reactions going to be? They change, they shift over time. And we're not looking at, and this whole analysis is not really looking at like tomorrow or today. It's looking, again, over the horizon that this is looming. So this has formed this alliance, shall we say. Now, you could say it sort of already existed between Britain and the United States, absolutely, and it did sort of already exist with Australia, but it has been significantly deepened here with this. Naval news here. 5 main options for Australia's AUKUS nuclear submarine deal. Now the nuclear submarine, if you understand the scale here, we can see down here 200 miles is the scale. This is a huge area of operation. To do so well, you need a nuclear submarine in the modern sense. Australia currently runs the Collins class submarine. It is a diesel electric. I don't know how quiet this is. Quiet has mostly to do with this, and some of it with hull shape and hull materials, not the diesel motors. Diesel, once it needs to drive diesel, it is super noisy, and the snorkel is up on the surface. German diesel electrics and a few others are some of the quietest submarines. Their propeller technology is very good, but because of that it's an air-breathing submarine, the diesel motors, with satellite techs and other things, you can kind of know that it's in the general area. How many of these might be operating somewhere? So where with nuclear submarines, and if you can get quiet, they won't even know what ocean you're in. Are you near? Are you far? Where are you? So I'm not going to dwell on these. They talk about some of the options for Australia. Now, Australia is going to be building the submarines down there and not just buying them. And this alliance is deepened because the US and the UK have in the past shared nuclear technology, submarine technology. Basically, that's what gets Britain up into the nuclear subclass, where France had to do it on their own. And I'm sure there was politics and other things involved in it, not just, well, I think de Gaulle might be part of the work. Or de Gaulle's legacy might be part of the issues there. But, and so they're based on sort of different technology, the French nuke submarines. This is important because Australia, surface vessels in the environment that we're talking about can only successfully operate with air cover of some type. These vessels here, and that's a supply vessel, and I think that's a supply vessel. But the other warships here will not last long in this area of operation, which we're talking about in sort of the littorals, not the deep oceans. The littorals are the coastal sea areas. And that's if we're talking about fighting a war in and around or for Taiwan, it'll be in this area. These vessels will not survive at sea for very long. There will be shore-based anti-ship missiles. There will be air-based anti-ship missiles, other air attacks, and ship-based anti-shipping missiles. And the Chinese will probably be throwing a lot of them around. And so without air cover of a significant element, of a significant type, your surface vessels will not survive for long in this combat environment. So Australia is too far away for air cover operations, and I don't know that Australia's Navy is going to, how shall I put this, rely upon Australia's Air Force or Australia's government to destroy Australia's Air Force in a faraway land, meaning that if they deploy it to the Philippines, to Taiwan, or someplace like that, and it gets shot down, sort of like a lot of the Spitfires were held back in Britain during the Battle of France, and they sent the Hurricanes over to land and fight in France because they were worried that if the Spitfires, they're considered their better aircraft, were all shot down defending France, there would be nothing left to defend Britain. It's that type of situation. However good Australia's aircraft, and this is not just talking about today or in the next 2 years, we're talking 10 to 20 years out, but a lot of viewers will still be alive, and this is an important idea that needs to be understood. If you understood that World War II might be coming in 1936, what could have been done to avert it or limit it? I don't know. Or to successfully crush Germany rapidly instead of having Germany almost winning until the US gets in and crushes them. So, and 10-20 years from now, these nations may not, the US or the UK might not be a reliable ally because of political changes. That is an important element here. So Australia, unless it's going to build carriers, and that's going to be very expensive, probably not the best thing for them to do, though it wouldn't be the worst thing, cannot run or operate a surface fleet up in here effectively against the Chinese. But whether it is purely the deterrence or the actual operation of, and I'll talk about some of the submarines in a moment here more, but the operations of the submarines in the combat zone, whether it's in the immediate combat zone or simply if war breaks out and Australia is a party of the war, one of the nations at war, their submarines can respond and start significantly inflicting damage upon China by sinking its commercial fleets, sinking its military fleets, and we'll get into some elements of that in a moment. That for them to be able to fight effectively, submarines and nuclear-powered submarines will be their best option. Japan is considering getting nuclear-powered submarines. Now, Japan, after the Fukushima, which is up here, incident in which the earthquake, which was bad enough, but the tidal wave was devastating, they are denuclearizing, if that's the right term, how you would say it, pretty heavily now. That because of this incident and the damage that happened because of it, that may be a very good idea for the particular nuclear power plants that they're denuclearizing, but we can talk about power some other time. But it is bad for Japan to conceptually denuclearize. To do nuclear power plants, is my understanding from being not a nuclear scientist, you need large amounts of water nearby to cool them. If, because of the types of earthquakes there are under the ocean, that is likely to happen there, are likely to create tidal waves. Well, Japan does have some fairly large inland islands, and they could create. Oh, the tidal waves can be created even in the inland parts here. So, coastally, they would need to be up on a high level above the inrush of any possible tidal wave from an earthquake, or they need to be inland on an inland major inland lake kind of operation. Either way would be doable. So since they have a nuclear power situation, they can operate or have the wherewithal to and there's talk of them trying to get nuclear submarines as well, and they would be able to send them to power. Australia currently does not have any nuclear power plants. I don't know what, if any, plans because of this or otherwise they're planning on getting them, or will their national defense policy be reliant upon allies such as the US or the United Kingdom for the nuclear fissionable material. Now, Australia, these lakes are illusionary, or periodic. I don't know the earthquake situation there, but again, they would need to be coastally for most of, well, where there's significant population. That's where you don't want your nuclear power plants where there's nobody, but because you want them to generate power. But they may be looking at going down that path. Now, it was stressed in the reporting on the new submarines that they were going to be nuclear powered, not nuclear armed. Bullshit. That is a fantasy. Yes, we're talking about a nuclear powered submarine. This is the Virginia class submarine, Block 5, the sort of latest block. I think a couple of them have come into production. And this is one of the options. And for Australia, whether they get the full technological package of a Virginia class submarine, and because there can be anything from sensors or other electronics that maybe the US would find too sensitive to let out even to them, to the Australians. Not that they really care what the Australians knowing about it, but just potentials for leaks to other adversarial groups. And whether they're going to build these or build the United Kingdom version or build some sort of hybrid of submarines, I don't know. People will see this here and think nuclear ballistic missiles, and that's quite true. But you can sort of see here and here, these can hold one big missile, something sort of like that, maybe. But they can also hold a clutch of these things. These things are cruise missiles. Now, technology is, and these are, and I know from reading a little bit earlier about Block 3 or Block 4 or something, I don't know. With some of these, they still have a few conventional torpedoes maybe on these, I don't know, but they're going, I can see down here, they're mounting in here, but mostly they're these vertical launch missiles, as we can see one there, and that can be launched underwater. They do not need to surface to fire, and so you do not need to aim your submarine at your target. You don't even have to with these guys. They'll be able to home in and target as well nowadays. That these are sort of packs of launchable weapons that can be swapped out between different ones that are pre-packaged bundles, if you will. And whether they are the US Tomahawk missiles of one flavor or another, they've been continued to develop over time, or whether they would be 10 or 20 years from now replaced with instead of a cruise or cruising missile, but a sort of a hypervelocity missile, meaning harder to shoot down, but not quite an intercontinental. See, they're not, and they very well may be set up without some of this, but more of this type of. You can see that's bigger to hold something. There's the hump in there to hold bigger missiles within the submarine, where some of them have even, some of the earlier blocks I think have more of these smaller pods in them. That they are not, ICBMs in submarines designed to, which the triad system in America, the submerged part, is the idea that they prowl around the world's oceans. If there's a nuclear war, they do sort of retaliatory strikes to anybody on the globe from undisclosed location, just somewhere out at sea. These missiles do not have that kind of range, but they can be nuclear tipped. They can be conventional tipped. To have a I'm sorry to do this. A lot of little bomblets, shall we say, that can take out like a battalion all at once of ground forces, or it can be an anti-ship missile, designed to strike a particular target. There's different warheads you can fit on it that can be launched, including a nuclear tipped missile that can maybe not destroy a whole city like Shenzhen, because it's a pretty damn big city, or the island of Hong Kong, but 3 or 4 of them, well placed, can do something like that from the vicinity. These are not, again, a ICBM nuclear ICBM submarine, something that could sit out here or sit wherever and launch and kill a city or more, because they'll have multiple warheads and really do a number on things. These are much more localized type weapons, but they can be. Now, whether or not Australia will get any of these missiles, and I presume the United Kingdom has them, I know the US has these nuclear tipped missiles. Whether they will be able to get any or not, I don't know. There's political ramifications inside Australia. There's political ramifications worldwide, including the general non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. We don't want Iran to become a nuclear nation with nuclear weapons. We've let North Korea do so. In India and Pakistan, do we break those treaties and alliances that America and the US have to give them the nuclear weapons? I don't know. To my knowledge, the only nation that has denuclearified verifiably that had a nuclear weapons program was South Africa as the apartheid was ending, and the South African old apartheid government did not want to hand nuclear weapons over to the ANC, so they made sure they all went goodbye. So they may not have ICBMs on them, but they may be given nuclear tip tomahawks or similar type missiles without telling the rest of the world, and they may try to communicate it about in such a way that it is private, no one knows except for the listening ears of China, so that China, whether they have them or not, China believes they might have them, so China is worried about them. And similarly, I think, though, there is a lot more political problems with Japan getting nuclear weapons, deliverable weapons. But I'll tell you what, because a lot of it is both international and domestic, because they were bombed twice by the US. But the moment that Japan feels it needs those weapons, they'll start building them. I'll tell you that right now. The moment the Japanese government feels it needs those weapons, basically feels that it is not protected by the United States nuclear umbrella, that if China or North Korea, or theoretically somebody else like Russia, but China and North Korea, the two most likely, might be throwing around nuclear weapons, if it believes the US would retaliate for it, it won't. But China or Japan will not be blackmailed by China in that we have them, we have the nukes, you don't. If you do something we don't like, including start to build them, we will nuke you. Japan won't stand for that. So Japan may push going down the nuclear weapons road as well as nuclear submarines. So we can see this strategic position. Japan is fortifying some of these islands in here. I'm not sure, some of the uninhabited ones. Now, Japan knows from its own experience in World War II, though China doesn't seem to know, fortifying islands is not going to be, in the modern sense, a terribly useful military strategy, because everyone knows where the island is. Everyone knows its location and can strike them. I'm talking about the very small ones, whether I don't know which, they may be talking about some of these even smaller. I don't know exactly which islands. I'm sure I could look it up, but not important here at the moment. Like the Japanese are, like the Chinese are arming up some of these islands out here. But by them putting weapons on them and manning them, it says to the Chinese, because what they're worried about, what the Japanese and others, but the Japanese are worried about, is one day they wake up and there's a Chinese military presence on what Japan considers its national territory, and the only way to get them off is, in essence, starting shooting operations, kinetic operations against them, whether it's just a counter invasion and hope that it just stays there, but one in which is going to be a kinetic military operation and not just a peaceful reoccupation. Basically a small Falklands Island type situation. That's the only way you're going to get them off, and if you don't get them off, they're just going to stay there and keep fortifying and keep looking for the next target. So Japan is putting forces there, not because they know it's a good military strategy, but is saying to the Chinese, if you come, it will mean fighting. That's what they're saying. Now, the garrison will probably die very gloriously, but that is sort of the point, in that it's showing commitment. Now, again, si vis pacem parabellum. If you want peace, prepare for war. So I am talking to everyone who's watching this that really you need to prepare for war. And then hopefully there will be no war. Hopefully there'll be no war. For the last 30 plus years, especially since the Clinton administration, the Clinton administration is the one that opens up trade with China, is that just give it a few more years, the Chinese Communist Party will collapse because of blah, 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 blah reasons. Ghost cities that they build, nobody lives in, just to keep people employed, blah, blah. They can't keep this up forever. It will just collapse. And it may. But they've been saying this for the last 30 years, and I don't... Now, maybe a particular leader of China may, and a few of them have sort of collapsed, but nothing has come near to collapsing the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. Particular administration of them, sure, but not the government, in my opinion, is anywhere near collapse. But then again, I didn't see the collapse of the Soviet Union coming so fast, nor of East Germany. But so it could happen at any moment. But I am not going to, and no government should plan its national defense policy on hopes. They need to plan on the darkest possible actions and hope things go better, but plan for the darkest. So, why die for Taiwan? There was German propaganda effort directed particularly at the French. Why die for Danzig? I think it probably sounded good, even better in, well, I don't know, in French or not. But why die? Well, we've talked about the strategical position, the ability to, and right now, if you want to know, China is the largest navy in the world. But in my opinion, it's junk. Could get into that don't know that we will. This video, I'm sure, will be long enough. We probably don't need to get into it, but it's a junk Navy. And I don't mean junk as in the old, just now hearing that it could be a pun, the old Chinese sailing vessel junk. No, it's a crappy Navy. It's, yeah, for multiple reasons. Not to overwhelm the naval resources of Taiwan. The question is how well can it do naval landings? I don't know. Taiwan does take its defense very seriously. But yeah, this allows power projection out here, which allows cutting off trade, cutting off incoming resources that these nations need to survive, basically, including South Korea, Japan, maybe less so Philippines because it's less industrialized. But yeah, now if you think, well, okay, again, why die for Taiwan? Geographical position, they're all Chinese, whatever. Well, we need to come and look at this. Maritime Great Game. I think this is coming from an Indian publication, but I think this map is relatively accurate. You see here. Okay, well, U.S. basing, and U.S. basing out in Diego Garcia. The U.S. understands, and it comes from Alfred Thayer Mahan, that islands like Diego Garcia, like Guam, are very important, but only in for position around the world, and only in the idea that they are resupply, originally coaling bases, but resupplying type operations. But they don't give, they're actually to some degree a insecurity. They don't give security. What gives security is the navies that base out of them. So when we're bombing Afghanistan, they're flying way out here from Diego Garcia, flying up there and then coming all the way back here, because it's a secure base that won't be attacked by terrorists. They can't get out of it. Now, and a U.S. base here in Djibouti. These, I believe, are French bases down here. Now, this. These are all Chinese ports. Basically, commercial ports that have been built, or maybe, you can have multiple ports within the same greater harbor area. Like here in California, there's the Long Beach, Los Angeles, or Los Angeles Long Beach port, or whatever. They're two different ports, but if you look on the map, they look the same, but they're two different port facilities in two different cities that run two different things. Right now, if you look at a current aerial photo or satellite photo, you'll see them all jammed up with cargo ships that will take till at least 2025 to clear the jam out. Now not all the ones that are waiting right now until 2025, but of course they're unloading them constantly as much as they can right now. But to get them cleared, because there's more coming in every day. Or trying to find other places, so it's going to be years to clear out the current backlog of ports in the Los Angeles Long Beach harbor. So some of these may be a pre-existing harbor that China, in a commercial way, has expanded and modernized significantly. Okay, so these are all commercial ports that China has built, expanded, set up. Note, Malaya. Though I understand, I don't know how old this is, Malaya has been rethinking its alliance with China and maybe basically ending it. I think that may be happening. I'm not sure. Bangladesh. Pakistan. These two are Muslim nations. Sri Lanka. There's the Tamils. I don't think they're really, well, the Tamils may be Muslim. I'm not sure. But in Sri Lanka, these are some major port operation or expansions I know in Sri Lanka. Those are worrying. What's extremely worrying is the Chinese naval, not commercial, naval base here in Pakistan, and the Chinese naval base next to the American. In fact, they've been like shining lasers and shooting other, beam weapons at U.S. aircraft from their base into the U.S. base here in Djibouti. These are the two Chinese military bases. And the blue ones are major Indian naval bases. Why does China even want a naval base in Pakistan? Why do they want a naval base in Djibouti? See, that's an interesting question. There can be multiple reasons. The biggest reason I can come up with is it's expecting it's China is willing to do actions. I'm trying to be very careful here in my words. China is willing to do actions that it expects India might be willing to go to war over. Okay? You see, I don't know. Well, I don't know. If I should pick a regional country or whatnot. Kuwait does not expect to do any international actions that would get India mad enough that it would be going to war over with it. Okay? Or, yeah. Now, the U.S., we can know whether it's, and you could, and I'm sure that China would give you some, there's the, the Somali pirates, and we have Chinese vessels going around, and we need our own navy here to protect them. Blah, 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 blah. We already have an international operation against anti-piracy there. But we all know that the U.S., whether you want to go, the U.S. is only interested in oil or whatever. Yeah, but the U.S., for whatever reason, for a long time, we have been deploying now into the Middle East. We have our reasons to be there. Good or bad reasons, that's another issue, but yeah. So China is thinking about doing something that could cause India to go to war with it. And maybe alongside Pakistan, Bangladesh. But that's what it is considering. So you notice here, it says the Malacca Dilemma. That's the Straits of Malacca. Over 80% of China's energy supplies are brought through this narrow passage. Okay. Well, if you're talking 80% of China's energy supplies, and China is going to do something either to India or something to Taiwan that would start a war, what are we talking about here, people? Let's just say this happens in the future. China perceives the world reaction to the invasion of Taiwan to be minimal. And the world reaction isn't quite ready or willing to go to direct war immediately, at least politically, whether it's politically or militarily or whatever, with China. but it's going to do something. And what it does, the US, United Kingdom, NATO, EU, whatever, is put a really big weight on countries and say, if you continue trading oil or other energy with China, you will not trade with us, and we will stop all international aid if it's a U.S. situation, if they get aid or otherwise. You're just going to be cut off. It's us or them. It's back to the Cold War kind of situation. You will ship no oil to China if you want to continue in our sphere of influence. Maybe without hardly firing a shot, because we don't know what may happen in other areas, you cut off China's energy support. What is China going to need to do at that point is go to war. Like Japan goes to war in World War II to get the oil in the Dutch East Indies at the time down here in Borneo. So there's still lots of oil down there. I don't know if that oil is enough to satisfy China's needs. But that might be a need for China to go to war. But China is preparing for aggressive foreign war. That's the only thing I can interpret with what's going on. But notice I said aggressive foreign war. And yes, if you want peace, prepare for war. And that's what they're sort of doing, guys. Please understand this. This is not necessarily, well, it is, in my opinion, clearly because of their own statements. Believe them when they say it. When Hitler says he's going to do stuff like invade the Soviet Union in his books or get rid of the Jewish problem, believe them when they say this stuff. They're going to go after Taiwan one day. Again, when they think they can successfully land and they think the world reaction will not be too big of a problem, whatever that analysis is, that is when they go to the invasion of Taiwan, the military invasion of Taiwan. Now they hope it'll be sort of like the Anschluss invasion of Austria, that they sort of are coming ashore, a few crackpots maybe decide to shoot their machine guns back at them, but the liberating People's Republic, the Uniting People's Republic of China, the PLA, the People's Liberation Army, is going to liberate and unify all of China back again, and that whether they've sold it to their people or sold it to themselves, or believe that the Taiwanese will just rather be red than dead, that they'll just have a peaceful invasion. That's what I think was their original long-term goal, was a peaceful occupation, if you will, of Taiwan, done rapidly and effectively, and round up the dissidents and send them somewhere. So that is not on the table. China is preparing for war. Now, what that means maybe is that they want to look so powerful, so costly to go to war with, that nobody will do so, that they'll just cave. That may be what happens. That may be what happens. But, and I should say, they may also want to be able to throw their weight around to nation X somewhere owes us trillions of US dollars or something that we've loaned them to build a new port somewhere, and they have oil, or they have oil offshore, or whatever it is, and since they haven't repaid their loans, we're going to need to go in like the French and the British did to Mexico when they didn't repay their loans. They went in to occupy them. Now, the Britain went in to seize the port facilities and try to collect tax on imports and exports out of Mexico. They eventually abandoned that once they realize that the French agenda really is just setting up a puppet regime in Mexico of Maximilian and trying to turn Mexico into a occupied puppet state, they were saying, nope, we're out, because that was never the British goal. In Mexico, they just wanted repayment, and since the Mexicans didn't pay them, they were going to send in troops, collect the monies, including the cost of the operations, and then, see ya. We've learned our lesson not to loan money to you. I believe China would be very willing to do that type of an operation on any one of these nations that it thinks it can get away with that, if it's not getting what it wants, which is not, quite honestly, the dollars back. It is political and economic access to a base. But if they're being frozen out of political and economic access, they may say, well, we want our monies. And if you don't give the monies, it's just the excuse. We'll have to come in and collect the monies and put in a favorable regime. That is the real goal. And if they look too dangerous, then they hope no one will react to it, as in go to war with them or try to oppose them. So that is the danger, is Chinese perception of the situation. Because these nations, South Korea, Japan, the Philippines, Vietnam, India, they all know that they live in the shadow of China. They know that if they become dominated by China, things will get worse for them. From whatever their current status, situation, economic, industrial, technological, it will get worse for them if China is dominating the region. And they do not want it. It's just like Japan. It was going to get worse for everybody with Japan during World War II era if Japan dominated the region. Japan is no longer trying to dominate the region, as in, political, put soldiers around. And so China is. I do not know really where China will stop with its expansionism. And I don't know that China knows where it will stop, because regimes change over time. The current leaders won't. I don't think the current leader, Xi Jinping, will be the leader of China in 20 years from now, just simply by age. Maybe he'll still be around. I don't know his age and I don't know his health, but I doubt he will be, and we don't know what will be the next policy or leaders. So this is a tinderbox. This is one of two flashpoints that could really set out to be a major global, possibly nuclear war. What can you do, or should you do? Be careful on who you support for leadership in governments in any of these nations around the world and their policies. With the internet, like I'm doing right now, you have a voice more so than ever before, and it shapes policy. So speak out. Hey, if you've made it this far, thank you so much. Please say you made it to the end. That would be cool. Posting, yes, I'm one of the 5 people that made it all the way through Gamers Talk on Taiwan and the coming conflict. May not be a kinetic conflict, but it is. The escalating conflict. That would be a good term. The escalating conflict. Si vis pacem parabellum. If you want peace, prepare for war. And that's what these nations are waking up and doing. And of course, one thing, and I'm mentioning it now, probably should mention it earlier, that's making everybody really afraid is what just happened in Afghanistan, That's a whole nother topic, but you know what we're talking about, the collapse there. And so that may embolden not just China, but embolden nations, which would destabilize the situation, which will probably make things worse. And we don't want that to happen. So if you made it this far, please post then. And of course, if you made it this far, you better have subscribed. You can share this out. What are your thoughts as well on this conflict and government's reactions to them? Thanks, everyone.